bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with the HockeyWriters.com, covering with you, as always, a handful of our writers that cover the Oilers. And we got Brian Swane with us. Brian, how are you?
Good, Jim. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. 7-1. You can't beat that, right? And Colton Pankiw is with us as well. Colton, how are you?
Doing good, Jim. Excited to get going.
Yeah, right on. No Julian Mongillo tonight. He said that he wasn't going to be able to join us, so we'll have to trek on without him. He's going to miss an exciting show because everything's perfect, right? I mean, most of the time we're on these shows complaining about something, but it's really hard to complain at this point in the season. Let's start there. Colton, I'll start with you. What do you think about the 7-1 start for the Edmonton Oilers?
It's pretty good. I mean, I obviously thought it was going to be 8-0 at this time. I kind of cursed them, saying that they'd go undefeated the longest. They dropped the next game after that comment. But it's been pretty good. I thought outside of that Flyers game, which I honestly thought they played pretty well in, it's been pretty good so far. I think last night was maybe a game that wasn't their best effort, but I think it says a lot about the team that even if they don't have the greatest game, they can still come out on top.
Yeah, they actually outplayed Philly in the game that they lost. And it was inevitably bound to happen that they weren't going to win every game, but they played much better than the Flyers did. And in some of these games that they're winning, they're actually being outshot a lot, but they're still finding ways to win, like you said. Brian, what about you? Is there any takeaways from the 7-1 start? Anything that you've noticed so far?
I've generally been impressed. I think this team is validating a lot of our hopes for them this season. I am going to temper this a little bit. And, I think people tend to overreact a lot. If they were off to a 1-7 start, okay, let's say even if they were off to a 3-4 start, the sky would be falling. The 7-1 start, I think we need to temper it a little bit. They've only played one playoff team from last year, and that was a team that was decimated by injuries, Vegas. They've caught a lot of teams on back-to-back. They've had a lot of games at home. So they haven't had the most challenging schedule. They've had to, they've got games that they should win, and they've gone out and won them. And I like Colton's point right there is that last night or at Monday night against Seattle was not their best game, and they still won, and they won by 3 goals. So that's a positive sign. You got to beat the teams that you should. And if you're a good team, you're going to win games on nights when you're not playing your best. And the others are checking both those boxes so far. I want to see how they do against the real legit contenders this year. And I don't think they've faced anyone remotely close to that yet.
Yeah, I guess I guess my counter argument to that would be that you've banked 14 points, right? Like you can't untake those away, which is the best thing about getting off to a really hot start. But I do agree with you. Like they haven't quite found their game yet. I remember saying, I don't know if it was last week or the week before. It was probably last week when we had Colin on with us talking about the Flyers. And I said, look, the Oilers haven't spanked anybody yet. Like, it just hasn't happened. Even Seattle, that may have been the widest margin in which they've won a game so far.
Well, they beat Arizona by 4, but everybody's beating Arizona by 4, right?
There you go. So very close, right? But they haven't really come out and played their absolute best hockey yet. It just hasn't happened. Not all 4 lines have rolled together all at once. Not that all 4 lines are playing a ton of minutes, but there's always been 1 or 2 players that have been really, really good. Colton, what do you think about the fact that everybody was sort of saying the second line? We need the second line. Like Draisaitl's been good with McDavid when he's moved up, or there's been decent chemistry between Nugent-Hopkins and Draisaitl, but Yamamoto didn't get going. He scores last night, as people record this, it'll be 2 days ago that he scored, but he finally gets off the schneid there. What do you think about the fact that the second line has been taking kind of so long to find that chemistry?
Yeah, I think it's not as talked about just because of the winning. I think, like Brian had said, if they're 3-4 and that line was playing the way they have, especially Yamamoto, I think that heat would be picked up a lot more. But hopefully that goal yesterday will get him going. I don't know. He just, to me, hasn't. I think he has been a bit better the last few games, but it still just doesn't look like the player it was a few seasons ago. So I'm kind of curious to see. I think if he goes on another bit of a cool stretch like the one he was just on, I think there's no question he gets demoted. But hopefully last night's goal is enough to get him going.
Yeah, I think Brian, you and I both thought we had a number of 20 goal scorers. I don't know if Colton said the same thing, but I know Yamamoto was probably on your list of guys that could get 20.
He was.
He hasn't showed it yet, but maybe, as Colton says, this will get him going a little bit. I didn't like the beginning of the season at all. I thought he was taking too many penalties. He was trying hard, but getting lazy at the wrong time. And now he's kind of cut that out of his game. He's been drawing a ton of penalties, and he finally scores one. So he's got a point on the board. Do you think this is what kickstarts him? Do you think he's still in that conversation of a guy who can kind of go on a tear here and get going? Or is he just going to sort of be, if he pops a goal every 5 or 6 games, we should just be completely happy?
That's a good question. I think he could get going. I mean, we've seen it in the past, and we saw it with the same line he's on right now. So, I mean, I don't think that guy that we saw 2 years ago has just suddenly disappeared. That's a great question. I mean, what does it take for, let's say that he picks up his game a little bit, but he's not producing a massive rate offensively. Like if he is chipping in with, let's say every, 2 goals and 2 assists every 11 or 12 games, is that good enough to keep him on the second line? Does his game completely have to accelerate back to, or somewhere close to back to where it was in the early part of 2020 for him to maintain a spot on that line? I mean, Tippett is showing a lot of faith in him over an extremely long slump, right? Like, I mean, we're talking a slump of like 30, 40 plus games here dating back to last season. And he maintained a lot of faith in him over that time to continue to give him the opportunities that he does. And maybe is that because he sees other elements of the game that he brings that can still help the others regardless of whether he's scoring? I guess what I'm boiling it down to, does he have to be a 20-goal scorer to be an effective second-line player?
So you're shaking your head, Colton, when he was talking about the 2 goals, 2 assists thing. I'll let you go first, and I'll tackle that one. What are you thinking when you shake your head like that?
Well, I think the Oilers are such a good team offensively, especially if he's playing on the second line with Draisaitl. Like if that's a consistent line going forward, then no, he can't be putting up offense like he is right now. It's just not. There's other guys I think that are capable of more. I know they want to keep that third line intact, but you got Cassie in there. There's just other options in this lineup right now that I think could easily produce what he is right now and probably would have more points.
Yeah, I'll go even further. If he produces at that rate you're talking about, Brian, where he gets, what'd you say, 2 goals, 2 assists in every what?
10 games.
10 games. I don't think he's on this team. Yeah. I think he's traded. I think there would be a team that would be interested in Yamamoto, giving him a shot, saying, okay, he's a young kid who's a restricted free agent. He's making a low money now. Maybe we'll give a flyer on him and see what happens. But I think the Oilers will look at upgrading that position on that second line if he does not kind of get rolling here. He does bring a lot of the things that you're talking about, but I think he's either 1, holding a spot for Dylan Holloway, or 2, they're going to go out and try to find somebody that really produces on a regular basis in the playoffs, because this window is not that big, right? Like they only have some, and if you're investing in Puljujarvi for next year over Yamamoto, maybe Yamamoto's not part of the long-term equation if he doesn't produce, right?
So I'll flip that around. I agree with you guys, but I'm thinking what Tippett and Holland might do. And I'm just saying, like, the fact that he has been given the amount of opportunities that he has over this extended period of time when he has not been contributing at that level makes me wonder how long his leash is, so to speak.
I think it's as long as the team is winning, right? Like if they're 7-1, you have the ability to have a little bit longer leash and let him work his way out of this. If they're 3-4, like you said, I'm not sure that leash is that long. Right. I could be wrong. And maybe they just believe highly in the player and they think that he's going to, really snap out of it no matter what kind of a lull he goes into. But he was not that great last year. Right. He had one really good run of 17 games 2 years ago and was on fire, but he's not ever shown that since. I don't know, Colton, do you agree?
Well, yeah, he hasn't been anywhere near the same player. I think last year he really struggled. And then it's kind of the same thing this year. There's just, like you said, I'd be curious, like if there's a move at the deadline, I would not be opposed to moving him to bring in that piece, even if it just is a rental, whether it's a goaltender or top 6 scoring winger. Like I really wouldn't be opposed to it at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what the trade would look like, but if he doesn't produce, he's not going to get much of a raise. And we saw what happened this summer where he thought he was supposed to be getting more than he got. And maybe they were right to just go, you know what, you're not worth more than this at this point. And he's doing a lot of good things, but he's not, and if you're going to give the money to Puljujärvi, which they're going to give the money to Puljujärvi, there's just no doubt about that. And they only have so much cap room. He doesn't really fit, does he? I mean, you still got to find a goalie. So there's a lot of things that you got to spend money on. And Yamamoto, if he's not producing, is probably not that thing. That all said, like I said, team's winning, lots of time. He could snap out of it. He could really get going. And maybe this goal that he had the other night is the thing that does it. One thing about it, Draisaitl loves playing with this kid. Like I think he would be bummed if he would understand because it's a business. But I think he would be bummed if Yamamoto got moved. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, everything else aside, I think one of the cooler moments of the season so far has been the reaction from his teammates last night when he did finally get that goal. I mean, you can tell that they love this guy. And then I don't know if you guys saw Draisaitl's comments post-game, but like he was really genuinely feeling this. Like he was happy for him, spoke a lot about how an important part of the team he is. So everything else aside, you're right. I think Draisaitl loves him. I think the entire locker room loves him, and maybe that plays a part in him getting a little bit more of an opportunity than he's deserved to this point.
Colton, is it a confidence thing with Yamamoto? Like, is that what's holding him back? Like, I just believe that he should shoot more. I don't know why he doesn't, but I think it's a confidence thing. What do you think? Why is it taking him so long to get rolling here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, like, because I thought he would have had all the confidence in the world heading into last season after that year, that brief stint he had in 2019-20. So yeah, I guess we'll see, right? If he all of a sudden puts up points in bunches, then that probably is what it was, just gripping the stick a little too tight. But I don't know. I'm just not convinced. I'm not a big believer in him from last year, and I hope he proves me wrong, but I'm not convinced right now.
Well, let's switch gears and talk about a guy that seems to have a ton of confidence. Let's talk about Mikko Koskinen a little bit. Brian, I'll start with you. You've been big on Stuart Skinner getting a shot. So far, it hasn't happened, and that's mostly because Mikko Koskinen has played so well in the absence of Mike Smith. In one kind of off game there where he wasn't very good. My belief was when he got, he didn't get pulled, but when he didn't play well, I was thinking, go back to him, right? Like, give him the confidence, make sure that he's good, see if he can rebound from a really bad game. Because that's the tell on Koskinen, is that he either lets in early goals or when he crumbles, he crumbles badly. So give him the shot. And he rebounded. He played fantastic. He's going to get the start again on Wednesday night. What do you think of Koskinen's play so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as Skinner goes, the stars have not aligned for him. I mean, it's just been the way it is, right? The Oilers have not had a lot of back-to-backs. Koskinen's been playing very well, so it makes complete sense to continue to he's not being overtaxed. I think when he played those 13 out of 14 games to start last season, it wasn't just a matter of him getting start after start after start. It was like start after start on back-to-back nights.
Yeah,
that really weighed a lot. And the others we're 3 weeks into the season and they played 8 games. So they haven't had a heavy schedule yet. I think he's been very good, and it's cool to see because I wrote about this about a month ago when he had that press conference during the preseason, or that post-game media avail where he talked about how difficult it was being away from his family last year. And now he's back together with them, and he just seemed in a better place emotionally and mentally. And I think that's really manifested itself in his play on the ice now. He looks, I think we saw it in the preseason, and now we've seen it through 6 games, 5.5 games here, outside of that, an off night against Philly. But I think we'll all take 5 out of 6 good games from Koskinen. If the 6th one's a stinker, that's okay. That's a lot better than the ratio that he's given the Oilers over the last few years. So I don't think this is necessarily fool's gold. I think you can play him. I think if you play him 40 starts this season, I think he gives you 30 quality starts. And it's just a nice thing to see. He's the guy who's been through the ringer a lot here with his heavy contract, his high contract, and his inconsistent play. And, this might have a happy ending after all. He's still overpaid, but.
Well, there's talk now that he's working his way into the contract at the end of the
right?
year, right? But
isn't this crazy? Yeah. Try picturing yourself saying that 4 months or 2 months ago, even, right?
Yeah, well, we did say, I think a number of us, I'm not sure who exactly, but said we figured Smith would take a little step back and Koskinen should take a bump up. Like we kind of all assumed that would probably happen, where Koskinen wouldn't be as bad as it was last year, but Smith probably wouldn't be as good. And we haven't really, Smith has been good when he's played, but he's injured again. So we don't really know exactly what we've got in Mike Smith. I say we, just as an Oilers fan. But Colton, what do you think? Is this the real Mikko Koskinen, what we've been seeing here over the last, 5 games? Is this kind of what we should expect moving forward, or is he just on a little bit of a run here, do you think?
It's so hard to tell. I think the real Mikko Koskinen, I think in general, he's just he's good, but inconsistent. I don't think he's a guy that is a bona fide number one on like a true cup contender. So I still am in firm belief that the Oilers at some point, maybe not this season, but in the future, like when you're alluding to some or saying an extension, like I just think it would be entertaining to see Twitter with that if they entered next season again with Koskinen and Smith. But I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I think it's somewhere in between. The one thing I do like is that he had that Philadelphia game where he let in a couple stinkers and just wasn't very good. And then last year that really seemed to just crush him. Like he had no confidence, but instead he's able to come back and he played pretty good against the Kraken last night. Like didn't have to make a ton of great saves, but I mean, I think the Kraken outplayed the Oilers. So I think it's nice that he's able to bounce back this year. I think he does look a lot better than he did a season ago.
I certainly like the fact that he has not given up the goals we've been used to seeing him give up, like first shot of the game. That was like a thing for him last year.
His thing is giving up the last shot of the game now.
Yeah, I suppose that's all right if you're winning 6-2, but to live, I mean, it's such a kick in the gut when you let the first goal in on the first shot of every game, right? Or I haven't seen a ton of glove stuff. Like typically the call on him is shoot high glove, and he almost always lets them in. I don't recall, and there's been a couple, but I don't recall like looking back at the games he's played and been like, oh my gosh, there's a glove hand again, right? They're not shooting high glove. Like he's been able to make some of those saves. And some of the saves that he has made have been like really solid 10-bell saves, right? Like just really good stuff, even after letting the stinker. So
and even timely too. Like they've been in situations when the Oilers needed a big save.
Well, I don't know if the Oilers have played a game except for maybe this. Have they outshot the opponent yet? I don't know. I'd have to look at the games, but most of these games are being outshot. That's the big thing on the Oilers right now is that they're letting too many shots. And then Tippett was like, this Fensky and Korski and all the stats that matter, right? Like he was talking about how most of the shots are like, what did he call it? When he said something about how they were lost pucks or something. He called them turnovers. They weren't actually shots. They were like turnovers that happened to hit the net. Like it's just one of those things, right? So I don't know how much you value how many shots the opponent's getting, but Koskinen has been good, right? When they play those games. I heard, Brian, I'll ask you this. I heard somebody with a theory. I don't believe it, but I'll ask you that they're putting Koskinen in as often as they're putting him in to showcase him for the potential move later on. It seems very early. It's only 8 games into the season. I can't imagine Tippett's even thinking that at this point. But do you think there's anything to that at all, that they're continually playing Mikko Koskinen to ride him while he's really, really good and then explore the idea of a trade? I can't imagine being this early, but what do you think about that?
Well, they're not mutually exclusive necessarily. I don't think that's why they're doing it. They're doing it because he gives them the best win or the best opportunity to win each night right now is why they're starting him. But at the same time, they are showcasing him and his trade value is probably going up. So, checking off both boxes.
So do you move him, Colton? Like if he shows well and he goes on a run here and he plays the next, 15 out of 18 games and he looks really good, do you consider trading him, or do you go, no, he's too good, we don't want to move him?
Well, first I was going to say like the showcase thing, like they're playing him because they pretty much have to, right? Like Smith's out right now. They weren't playing him at the start of the year, but I don't know. That's like, it depends who you're getting back. Obviously, like you're not going to move him for a top 6 forward and just leave Smith and Skinner at the helms. If there's a goalie coming back, maybe it would really depend on who for me. I've seen some suggestions that I'm not as crazy about, so it would depend on who, but I don't know. It's tough. Like, I think if him and Smith are able to keep playing how they are right now, then you probably just hold on to him and go into the playoffs with that tandem.
Yeah. And I can't imagine them signing those two guys again. And if you signed Koskinen, you have to sign him like a 1-year deal, right? Like, can you imagine? People would lose their minds if you gave him like a 3-year extension based on this one season. Like, I can't even imagine what that would look like, but it'd be quite interesting to say the least. I do want to talk about something that I think is very interesting because we've been talking about Kailer Yamamoto, how he's not scored. But it's a little different than Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who has not scored, but he has 11 assists. He's leading the NHL in assists. Colton, we'll start with you. what do you think about the fact that he's like the Joe Thornton of like 7 seasons ago, right? Where he had like 100 and some points and like 91 of them were assists or something crazy. Like he's been killing it, setting up the guys, but he hasn't scored yet. Do you worry that he hasn't scored, or do you just go, this is fantastic that he's leading the league in assists?
Yeah, no, I'm not overly worried. I think the one thing that maybe could be a bit better is 5-on-5 play. Not that it's been bad, but I don't know exactly how many of those points have come on the power play, but I imagine a good chunk just given how good that power play is. But no, I think the goals will come for him. And overall, I think he's looked a lot better this year so far than he did last year.
Well, he's on pace for what, like 11 points. And we shouldn't be using this. We had this big conversation about the on pace comment that you can't really say it.
I got the numbers if you want them.
I was just going to try to pull them up while I was filling time here. Go ahead, Ryan.
He's on pace for 0 goals and 112 assists.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Like, we know that that's not going to happen. We know he's probably not even going to lead the league in assists, but the fact that he is a point a game player is wonderful, right? Like, we were all talking about the fact that we needed him to have a bounce back season. The Oilers needed him to kind of step up and be a 60, 70 point guy again, and he looks like he's going to do that with ease. It's just how many goals he gets. Brian, are you at all worried that he hasn't scored yet?
I'm not. No, in fact, I'm the opposite. I was looking at the stats last night. I'm like, wait a second. Nuge is leading the league in assists. Like, he is leading the league in assists like that. I mean, that's pretty crazy to me. So he's going to have to score. And I'm sure he will eventually, but yeah, no, I'm not worried. It would be nice to see him with 3 or 4 goals at this point, but I'm more impressed by the fact that he has 11 assists than I am concerned that he has no goals.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to see a lot of this spread out, I'm sure, over the season. Like, It could be one of those situations where Nugent-Hopkins gets, 4 goals in 5 games. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's what it just, the power play's been so good and Draisaitl's been open so much. So is McDavid with that one time where he's trying to get going, that Draisaitl likes to call fluffy. They're shooting from the point. They've got numerous options. Nugent-Hopkins just gets to keep setting them up, right? Like, I don't know why you wouldn't. It's such a pretty power play. And to Colton's point, I don't know. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Maybe while we're talking, Brian can look them up. But how many of those are 5-on-5 points versus how many of them are power play points, right? So there is probably something to that. But that second line's been decent in Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins. I know he does have a couple 5-on-5 points because I remember one time, was it the Cassian goal where he was subbing in on that third line for Derek Ryan and they put that thing right on his stick, right in the crease there? Like, he's got some 5-on-5 points. So he's been pretty good. But yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm not necessarily worried that he hasn't scored yet. I'd like to see it happen. I know Draisaitl was looking for him last night. Instead of going for the hat trick, he was trying to find him to see if he could get him. Did you guys notice that Draisaitl picked up the puck for Duncan Keith? Did anybody notice that in the game?
I didn't notice that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Because his first goal, right? First goal as an Oiler, he went out of his way. Like, Draisaitl's good about that stuff. Like, he's looking for Yamamoto. He's pat him on the bum when he gets that goal and gets off the schneid, right? He's looking for Nugent-Hopkins in a game where they know they've got a 1 and he just wants Nugent-Hopkins to get going, right? Even though he's got 11 assists, he still wants to get him going. He picks up the puck for Duncan Keith, first ever Oilers goal, right? Like, he's a really silent kind of leader. He's getting more comfortable in press conferences too, but I've been very impressed with Draisaitl this season for a number of those reasons. What should we talk about last one? Let's talk a little bit about what's happened so far this summer, what it looks like for the team, who's clicking, who's not, the moves that Ken Holland made. I've heard early rumblings, again, way too early, but GM of the year, are we in that situation? Colton, do you think Ken Holland at this point has proven that his moves this summer, even though some of them were questioned, were good moves, that he might be in that conversation if things continue this way?
It's funny to see, just because, like you said, when some of those moves were made, people were just losing it already, getting ready to wanting them fired and everything. And now, I don't think there's really any that you can say haven't worked out yet, acquisitions he made this offseason. I think everyone's looked quite good. So, I mean, obviously it's really early for GM of the year talk, but I mean, right now I'd say he's definitely a front runner for it. And if they're able to continue this stretch and finish first in the Pacific at the end of the season, then I'd say he's right there.
Well, Brian, what criteria allows you to be GM of the year? Like, if you're a good team going into the season and you stay a good team, are you just automatically assumed to be in that conversation? Or are you kind of team where you have to make major changes like Holland did and then be a very good team after those changes? Like, I don't really know what they use as criteria to decide who's up for nomination here, but If it's the latter, where you make a lot of changes and your team is really good after those changes, then Holland's got to be in the conversation, doesn't he?
Yeah, I guess so. I was just about to say, like, if we were to prepare a nomination paper to submit to the NHL for why this man should be GM, what would we be highlighting? Like, would it be, and so I don't know. I mean, is it, how much of it is based on expectations of what the team was supposed to do versus what they do achieve? I think that plays a part in it. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess all we can do is base on his offseason acquisition so far. And I think I'm going to throw this at you, Jim, because I know, I mean, we talked ad nauseum this summer about the Keith trade, right?
Yep.
Where do you stand on that now? Like, is that now, are we looking at this now as like, actually, this is something that if we're presenting his case for GM of the year, is that actually one of the things we point to?
Oh, I'm sure it'll be in the conversation when all is said and done. And that'll be a major factor as to whether or not Holland's in that conversation. Like Hyman, to me, was probably a no-brainer, right? Maybe in year 4, 5, and 6, you're not having the conversation about Holland as GM of the year because we find out what that later part of his contract looks like. But we knew the first 2 or 3 years Hyman was going to be good. Maybe we didn't know he'd be this good. We knew he'd be good, right? The big question mark was Cody Ceci and Duncan Keith. And I did actually write an article about these guys today, and it's on the Hockey Writers if you want to check it out. But I was saying there's a little more time needed to really judge whether or not these were wins in terms of additions, but they've looked really good. In fact, my big argument was, and Daniel Nugent-Hopkins of The Athletic made the same argument, is that they've been put in defensive zone faceoffs and situations like the whole season, right? They kind of took over for Adam Larson. So they've been getting peppered with chances against from the get-go before the puck is even dropped. They're in a disadvantaged position. On Monday was the first time they weren't against Seattle, and they were even, right? So for all these analytic numbers and the people who study the advanced stat stuff where they're always saying, oh, Duncan Keith and Cody Ceci are getting killed, it was even. It was like 11-11, 5-on-5, and then they actually, Duncan Keith scored. And so they were about, and I think they've been pretty good together. I mean, they're still learning. They're still getting used to each other, and they haven't played together except for 7 games, right? So I do like the addition so far. Still don't like the contract. Still don't like the trade. I don't think that's ever going to change my opinion. I don't know if I'll ever be like, oh yeah, that was a wonderful deal. But I didn't mind Duncan Keith, and he's showing that he is what the Oilers thought he was going to be. Let's hope it lasts. But I think he's got to be in that conversation. If you're going to consider Ken Holland GM of the year, Duncan Keith's in that. They're connected at the hip, those two things, right? Because if Duncan Keith poops the bed and he winds up not being a very good defenseman this year, you can't put Holland in that conversation. And if Duncan Keith is really good and the Oilers go up, and he plays well and plays tons of minutes and they win a couple rounds, I think he's in that conversation. Colton, am I wrong? Do you think Duncan Keith and Ken Holland, they're sort of attached at the hip here if you're having that conversation?
Yeah, they have to be. I think that was, well, not I think, that was without a doubt his most talked about move this offseason, and the one that everyone was criticizing, and like myself included. So I think if they are, or if he is to be in the running, that has to be one that's talked about. Because like you said, if he has a really bad year, then there's no chance, I think, that he could be up for the award.
I do think Derek Ryan's a big part of the conversation too. I know he's not, fancy name. He's not a stylish signing, but he's been really good, and he was signed very cheap. And a lot of GMs miss on those. Holland's missed on him too, right? He missed on Kyle Turris a little bit in that spot, and he missed on other players. And previous GMs of the Oilers have missed badly on trying to find those guys. But Derek Ryan seems to fit like a glove. So I think when you factor all those things in, maybe the goaltending becomes a thing. But yeah, it's too early to say that Holland's, should be a shoe-in for at least that conversation. But he made some really smart moves, and none of them have backfired yet. So let's cross our fingers that they don't. Brian, do you think there's one that could?
It could backfire?
Yeah, like a move that he made that really looks good, but could look not so good.
Well, the not adding another goalie, like deciding to roll forward with who they have, that could backfire. I mean, yeah, anything could backfire. We're 8 games into the season. I'm not saying that I think it will, but that would probably be the one that I think would be the most, because the season hinges on that, I think, in a lot of respects, right? Like if Smith things are going great right now, but if the Smith and Koskinen are not carrying the load or, doing their share in between the pipes, then this team is only going to go so far. So that would probably be what I would say would be the one.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let's say Holland, if he's going to be GM of the year, has to recognize when that goaltending needs upgrading, if it needs upgrading. So how soon would he have to recognize that it's a problem? Like, would he need to make a change right away? Would he be okay if he made a change at the trade deadline? Like, say it's injuries, say it's just poor play. At what point would Holland have to pull the trigger on upgrading the goaltending for him to still be like, okay, we can save this season if you think the season rides on this?
Oh, I think you can give it until a trade deadline. I think we saw in 2006 with the acquisition of Dwayne Rollison that you can add a goaltender at the trade deadline, and he can come in, join the team, and with only, whatever, maybe 20, 25 games left in the season. And that's all he needs to acclimate himself and carry the team on a long playoff run. It's not just Rollison. I mean, we've seen him with other examples in past years with other teams as well. So I think you can wait into the deadline. And I think the longer, because if they do get into a tough patch here, I think you don't want to overreact to that either, right?
Yeah.
So I think the trade deadline is the perfect time. You've mentioned this a few times too, right? I mean, I think that gives you a really good sample size to know what you have with these two guys.
Well, and a lot of names will be available then that
Yes.
might not be available now. And Colton, you mentioned earlier in the video that there were some goaltending options out there that you didn't like. So I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to ask you to be a little bit more specific. So if there's names you've heard, whether it's Korpisalo or Marc-Andre Fleury or John Gibson or whatever the name is that you don't really like, is there somebody out there that you'd be like kind of keeping your eye on if you're Ken Holland and you're thinking, okay, at some point I might have to do this? Who would I be looking at, or who should I be looking at? Do you have a name?
Jeez, I wasn't prepared for that. I think the one that I really like is John Gibson, but that would cost a ton, I would imagine. I think he's still one of the better goalies in the league. His numbers have just went a bit down the last few seasons due to playing behind the Ducks. But I don't mind the Fleury one either. The one that I was really alluding to, well, the two actually, I've heard about Korpisalo and Khudobin quite a bit, and I don't see either of those two as an upgrade over what they have at all right now. I think just looking at especially Korpisalo's numbers in Columbus over the last however many seasons, I don't think it's an upgrade at all. It might even be a bit of the opposite, and the fact that they'd have to give up some assets for that. That's the main one I was talking about when I said there was some that I wasn't as big about.
Well, he is definitely the goalie that everybody seems to know is available, right? Because the Columbus Blue Jackets have invested in Merzlikins, and then they are going to move Korpisalo, whether or not they get what they want for him or they can move him, for anything more than a mid-round, late-round pick. I don't know. But, I agree. I don't think he's an upgrade over Koskinen, if that's who we're talking about moving, right? Like, I think you'd have to move Koskinen in that trade. Columbus might not care because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. But is that where you're going? Like, are you going from Koskinen to Korpisalo? Is that really any better? Koskinen would really have to crap the bed for that to be an upgrade, right? So it'll be very, very interesting. I didn't put this on our slot, but I'll close it off with this one. Oilers play Nashville. As people watch this video, they're going to be playing the Nashville Predators. And we've kind of done this before, so let's do it again. Brian, let's predict what that game's going to look like. As I've said, they haven't really spanked anybody. They've sort of been outshot a lot, but they're still pulling out the wins, with the exception of Philadelphia. What do you think happens in the game against the Predators?
5-3 Oilers. Yamamoto scores again.
Did you say 5 for the Oilers?
5-3.
Okay. And what about you, Colton?
Yeah, I think just with us talking about like how much they've kind of failed to take control of games, especially shots and everything. First off, I'll say 5-2, but I think they really come out and just are flying tomorrow and outshoot them by a fair bit too.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know what the score is now as we record this. Calgary is playing Nashville, and when we started, it was 2-1. I have no idea what the score is now, but Nashville did not look very good defensively. I think in the first period, Calgary had like 18 shots or something on Nashville. So I'm going to suggest if that continues and it's a back-to-back for Nashville, it's probably not going to be pretty. So I'm going to say the Oilers haven't gotten a shutout yet, I don't think. I'm going to predict one. I'll say 4-0 for the Oilers. And my last question for you guys is we've got Nashville tomorrow. We've got the New York Rangers on Friday, Detroit on Tuesday. So if those 3 games, are those all winnable games for the Oilers? Do you believe they can go 10-1 to start the season? Colton, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely all winnable, but I do think that the Rangers are a team that maybe a lot of people aren't realizing yet. They're really good. Like they got Panarin, Zibanejad, Adam Fox on the back end, Shesterkin and net. So I mean, that's by no means a gimme game, but I do think that they're the better team of all 3 right now.
What about you, Brian? Do you think the Oilers can win the next 3 in a row?
Yeah, I do. I feel so confident in this team right now. There's not a game that is not winnable. And I mean, the schedule continues they still aren't getting, I know it kind of picks up next week, but none of these games, again, none of them are back to back. I mean, they got a fairly favorable schedule here. I don't see any reason they can't start 10-1.
Yeah, they don't have a back-to-back till the 11th, 12th of November when they're in Boston and then they're in Buffalo. So who knows? Boston's always a team that's good, and Buffalo's surprising us all right now. We don't really know what's going on over there, but hopefully that's they can keep on the roll here. Let's close her off at that one. We'll have Julian back next week. Colton, I appreciate it. Brian, I appreciate it. For everybody else who's been watching this, feel free to like, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Same thing for Facebook. Come back to it. Check out the other content on the YouTube channel. Or go to thehockeywriters.com. We've got tons of articles all the time about the Oilers, and happy to kind of keep rolling. But we'll let everybody go. We'll say good luck to everybody. Enjoy the game as you watch this video tonight when they play Nashville. Enjoy the game. And for everybody else here at the Hockey Writers, it's been another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. We'll talk to you next week.